Now, when you finished school, were you one of those who vowed that you were leaving your hometown never to return? Well, the main character in Michael Burge's book did just that, but a series of tragic events, including the death of a relative and inheritance of a property, bring him back to that hometown. But is there something more sinister at play here? Tankwater is a novel from Glen Innes author Michael Burge, and he's here to tell us about it for our Thursday morning book club. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Kristy, how are you?
Yeah, really well. Thank you for your time today. Hey, congratulations on this book. I've seen it popping up on social media all over the place.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's very exciting. It's very exciting, my first book. So, yes, it doesn't get much better. Thank you.
Yeah, I imagine hours and days and weeks and months have gone into this precious debut novel. Tell me,
It sure has.
Yeah, tell me a bit about the story itself, because it's a great story. I've got a copy of the book here. It's a great story, but it's pretty dark. It's pretty deep as well. What inspired this book?
Well, a few things. Look, it's definitely a homegrown tale. It takes into account the landscapes and the stories, particularly my old family stories. I grew up on a farm outside Delungra, near Inverell, but this is not a tale which is based in a real place. It's definitely the northern New England region, but all of the towns and the characters are fictitious. So it comes from my experience of growing up and living here.
You mentioned it took you a good 10 years to write this book. Why was that? Was it just a story you wanted to tell eventually? Was there a lot of research involved? Did you feel now the timing was right for the book?
It probably was timing, but it most certainly was about research, because some of the themes that Tankwater deals with fall into the category of what we now know as gay hate crime. And these cases, which are coming to the surface now across Australia's cities, particularly the Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong region, with the overturning of the suicide ruling on the death of Scott Johnson at Manly in the late 1980s, and the more recent case of Raymond Keane, who was killed in Randwick in the late 1980s. So some of those cases were identified by researchers in the country, and they're very, very difficult to find out the facts about. And so I embarked on many years of research to find these cases. It's a very taboo subject. It doesn't come much more taboo than this in the country. And even sort of along the bush telegraph, as we call it, they're barely whispered tales, but they are there. So I had to do my footwork to draw them out. And one of the investigations that listeners might be aware of was the New South Wales Police internal investigation called Operation Parabel. That found almost 90 cases of gay hate crime or suspected gay hate crimes, and a very small number of those took place in the country. In fact, one of the names on that list was a young man in Inverell. Now, I have to underline that his case is not definitively gay hate crime. We don't know if this young man was indeed gay, but he certainly died in circumstances that were initially found to be suspicious. So I did a bit of footwork to follow that trail to see what I could find, but also the way that communities respond to knowledge of these kinds of crimes, not just in the New England, but country communities across the country. And as what happened in Inverell, but very often happens, is that these cases do kind of disappear from the town's consciousness. Now, that is a major theme of Tankwater, the way that towns respond to these historical crimes and, how they move forward once they're aware of them.
Michael, this must have been an incredibly emotional project for you as you looked at the research, you spoke to people, you got a greater understanding of some of these crimes.
I did. Look, I can't beat around the bush. It's a very grisly subject to be researching, and I found myself having to tread very carefully because we're dealing with real people, we're dealing with their families and survivors. But there's been a lot of footwork done long before I came along. there was a New South Wales parliamentary inquiry into gay and transgender hate crimes that wrapped up late last year, and I was able to observe those and read the submissions. And yes, I did find myself feeling quite confronted by it. So I'm an out gay man. I grew up in the country. I did leave the country like my protagonist James did, and but I eventually came back, and so I had a lot of kind of personal material and experience to pour into Tankwater. And I think country readers can feel in very safe hands because I feel, portrayed the country in a true sense. It's not all a bed of roses, of course, but there's some amazing communities across this country in the rural sector. And really, I've been absolutely heartened by the response wherever I go about LGBTIQA plus issues. And, of course, New England proudly was a yes voting electorate in the marriage equality public vote. And that was great. The result landed 2 weeks after I moved back here with my husband to the Glen Innes region. And we've just seen shining examples of acceptance ever since. So while Tankwater does delve back into the grim past, it also speaks a lot about hope for now and the future.
Brilliant. We're talking to Glen Innes author Michael Burge this morning. His debut novel, Tankwater, is out now, and we'll talk a bit more about where you can get your hands on a copy in just a moment. Michael, given all the research you've done, where this book has taken you, some of the conversations you've had, how did you feel prior to the novel being released? The night before, the day before, was it all excitement? Was there a level of nervousness as a debut author as well?
Oh, all of that, absolutely, Absolutely, all of that sort of stuff. But it was nothing compared to the experience 5 or 6 years ago when I released a memoir about some experiences I had during, the very, very early days of the marriage equality campaign. So writing real life, which I do a lot as a journalist, reporting and writing stories about real life, I think that's always much more acutely emotional before it comes out. Because the ramifications are greater. You're talking about real lives. Tankwater it gave me an opportunity to explore this very touchy subject matter in a fictional form, and it makes it easier to talk about. In fact, I'm finding in my experience, it's making it easier to talk about those real life cases of gay hate crime, the historical cases, through this fictional prism, and it gives people an opportunity to talk about it and to talk about the issues and talk about their own stories, because there are a lot of stories out there in the country that have never been told. And I encourage people, even if they haven't read Tankwater or don't intend to, but I encourage them to talk about those stories. The more we talk about them, the better our communities are in the journey to much broader acceptance of gay, lesbian, transgender, etc.
Michael Burge is with us this morning. His book Tankwater is out now. Michael, interestingly, there's a bit of a story to go with how you finally got this book published. I understand that the New England Writers' Centre had a bit of a role to play here.
They sure did. Look, they're fantastic, the New England Writers' Centre. So I was very lucky to have the opportunity to go to a pitching session, which for non-writers, the best way to describe it is to call it speed dating with editors and agents. So in late 2018, the New England Writers' Centre created a pitch session, and they invited some interstate publishers to come and meet New England-based authors and writers and illustrators. And so it was at the bowling club at Armidale, and we all went along, and it was I'd never done anything like it before in my life. I've never done speed dating either, but it was sort of, you had your 10-minute to pitch. And I read all about everything I could about the process, and one of the best pieces of advice that I read was to not talk the whole time, just to give the other person an opportunity to ask you questions. And it went right against the grain of my nature to have 10 minutes and to not yammer on the whole time. But I stopped, and then, of course, those publishers that I met that day then started to unravel the story that I was pitching with Tankwater, and both of them were interested in seeing the manuscript, which is the best outcome you can expect from those kinds of sessions, which are popping up all over the publishing sector now. So I encourage other writers, particularly New England writers, to seek them out and have a try. Some of them are happening online. And then probably about a year later, I received an offer of publication from Anna Solding of Midnight Sun Publishing, based down in Adelaide. But I never would have met Anna without that support of New England Writers Centre to bring her to this region, and the other editors on that day. So it was a fantastic, unique experience for a homegrown New England tale by a New England-based writer to meet a publisher who would then platform the work for a much wider audience. So it's in that respect, it's a commodity from the New England being exported, which I'm really, really happy about.
Yeah, what a wonderful story. It's local in more ways than one, Michael. Look, it's been great to talk to you today. I know we've only scratched the surface of this book, but people can pick up copies online, but also locally as well. You've had some good support from local bookstores.
Oh, yes, we love our local bookstores, and I encourage listeners to get out there and support them as they're reopening and as people are able to travel around more and get into town and go to the high street shops. So, of course, we've got Wise Words out in Moree, Collins in Tamworth and in Armidale, the fantastic Reader's Companion in Armidale. But you can also buy my book at my little bookshop, The Maker's Shed in Glen Innes. So that's a good network of people to get around to get hold of their books. But all of those bookshops, you can also just call them up, buy it over the phone, buy it online, have it posted to you. But if you don't have any of those options, of course, you can buy Tankwater and other New England authors' books online. So I encourage listeners to get out there and buy a book for spring, because it's a great time to sit in the warming weather and be transported by a book.
Yeah, good on you, Michael. Again, congratulations on this book, Tankwater. It's been great to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Kristy. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michael. You too. That is Michael Burge there, Glen Innes author, his debut novel, Tankwater, out now.